great things happen. I tell my friends all the time, if you look at every social movement that happened in the United States, almost all of them began with young people. So you have tremendous power beyond that you even know that you have or possess inside of you. So when you put your heads together, great things can happen. You can really, truly move the world. So what I wanted to do, I want to take you back a little bit to where I grew up, and I want to take you on the journey to the NBA, and I want to finish with what I consider some of my favorite leadership qualities. And then I'll give you an opportunity to ask some questions that I may not have addressed in this talk. So, at the age of, I think it was 14, I'm living in Canada, and I was about to get kicked out of primary school because I was getting up to be that age 15 when you have to figure out the next thing to do. And I remember saying that, okay, this is a moment of truth. What do I do with the rest of my life? And I remember saying that the only way that I can do this is to stay in school. It was just that kind of moment of clarity. I needed to stay in school. I didn't know how this was going to happen, but I needed to stay in school. And I wanted to become a lawyer. Anything, but I needed to stay in school. And I remember I went up to my teacher and I said, I need to pass school leaving. I need to pass this examination. Whether it kills me or not, I need to pass. And she looks at me and she's like, okay, I'll help you. And I remember just burning the kerosene lamp. My grandmother got so frustrated at me because I would stuff like, you know, the sheets under the door so she couldn't see the light was on so I could study late at night. And I decided that I needed to stay in school. I needed to go on to another level. I needed to go to high school. And I studied, she complained, I studied, she complained, but I keep doing it. And I remember passing the school living examination, and I went over to Union, which is from Canada that has 600 people. Union was a metropolis because they had 3,000 people. And, you know, in that moment, I realized something very important, that my first day, I discovered basketball. And I was horrible at it. In fact, I stunk it up. I mean, it was bad. I remember the first time I grabbed the ball, I ran the full length of the court, laid up, and my friends were just killing me because I had forgotten to dribble. Kind of didn't think that was important to the game. But I was determined to be good at it. And I think that's what this is about. Is that at the end of the day, each and every one of you have to make that decision, that crisis point decision. You know, how are you going to define your life beyond your parents, beyond your friends? And I think this is true of what I will talk about later, which is probably my most important characteristics of leadership, which is, what is your moral scratch line? And by that I mean, what is that thing? What is that one thing that you would do anything for? What is that essential character in each of you that you would challenge your friends on? That's, to me, is the key component of leadership. How do you find your moral scratch line? So, at the age of 15, I went to Union Island and I discovered basketball. I was horrible, but I was tall, skinny, mager, as they call it. Magadag, as they called me when I was growing up. But the thing that drove me my entire career is simply this. You will never amount to anything. You will always be terrible. We could be cruel at times. To say that to a young person is a very cruel thing. But I had to realize that that is not putting me down. That is giving you fuel for the fire. You have to learn how to shift negative into positive. And I understood that to mean one thing. I'm going to show you what I can do. And my entire life was led on that premise. I will show you what I can do. And I go back and see those very people who challenged me and told me I would never amount to anything. And I continue to show them to this day what is possible. Because you know what? It doesn't matter what anybody said. The mind is the most powerful thing. And once you have mastered that, no one can touch you. So I went to Union Island Secondary School. And again, they say, boy, you're too tall. You're going to beat the teachers up. You need to leave and you need to go fishing. I'll go walk in the road. And I said, no. I want to do this. I want to be in school. And one of my friends said, you know, you're tall enough. You could play basketball. I said, okay. So I tried it. I was terrible at it. But I keep trying it. And by faith, the team that I joined, the local team, went to Dominica for the OECS tournament. And it was there I met two college professors from Colgate University. And they asked me, have you ever thought about going to the United States and using your basketball skills to get an education? And I said, no, but sounds like a good idea to me. And I remember going back home after talking to them for a while and telling my mother that I wanted to leave to go to the United States to pursue my education and basketball. And I think the look on my mom's face says it all. You must be out of your bloody mind, boy. And I remember trying to convince her, trying to make a logical argument. This is a really good thing, Ma. You really got to let me go. And again, it's like I have all these checkpoints along the way where I could either have gone one way or the other. And that's, you know, essentially that's what life is about. It's about those diverging roads that you have and whether or not you make the best decisions to go one way or the other. I mean, I think Robert Frost has it right. You know, two roads diverge in the woods and I take the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference. That's what it means to be a young person, is navigating those choices, those roads, deciding which to take. One of the greatest things that I heard during my career was choices, decisions, consequences. It's the treefer that rules everything that you will encounter in your life. Choices. You have all these choices. You have a plethora of choices in which you can choose from. The decisions you make from those choices either has negative or positive consequences. That's it. That's life. Because those are the things that you're going to constantly do throughout the course of your life. Something is going to happen. You're going to respond to it one way or the other, and you live with the consequences of what happened. If you could get that into your heads, if you don't learn anything from this conference, and you can get that into your head, that let that be your guiding principles. Let that be the determination of how you move forward in life. Choices, decisions, consequences. You will be able to maneuver through any decisions that you have. So the crisis point for me, I went to high school, and I was recruited by almost every Division I colleges in the United States. And the critical decision was, do I go to Michael School? Do I go to Charles School? Do I go to David Robinson School? How do you make a decision that's going to define your life? Academics or sports? I chose academics. Despite the overwhelming opportunity to go to the biggest schools anywhere I wanted in the country, I went to Colgate, a school that nobody heard of except for toothpaste. And in my mind, it was simple. How do I go to a school that would treat me both as a student and as an athlete? I was a student athlete. I was not an athlete and I was not a student. I was both. And I wanted a place that would appreciate both. I wanted a place where even if I score 50 points, And the court, the first thing the professor asked me for in the morning, where's my paper? You might have scored 50 last night and you think you're hot stuff, but I want my paper. And that was important for me. Because the knowledge that you're going to gain through your life is going to be able to lead you through many, many different paths. So I decided that I wanted to be an NBA player. And I believe that I can do it from Colgate. And despite everybody telling me that I couldn't do it from Colgate, I said, yes, watch me do it. So I went to Colgate and became the first person who has been drafted there in almost over 20-something years. And I became the 8th overall pick in the 1997 NBA draft. Despite all the odds to the contrary, this boy, born in Counterone, population 600 people, left here, went to the United States, became a good student, graduated from college, magna cum laude, and drafted 8th overall by Golden State Warriors. But little did I know that the biggest challenges of my life was yet to come. You will think that you have made it to the promised land. You have money now. You have all these things that are possible. And yet, the biggest one was trying to figure out how to get my fellow athletes to pay attention, how to get my college friends to be civic-minded. Those are the guiding principles that lead my life. How do you engage a population that everybody thinks is apathetic, or worse, lost? So, the NBA was, I guess the best way to describe it was a lot of really rich, really young people. And what that meant was the challenges that was before us was huge. You have money, but you lose it within 5 years of retirement. You had everybody want something. You have family coming out of the woodwork that you didn't know existed. You have ladies throwing themselves at you. You have financial people waiting and ready to rip you off. And again, it goes back to how I was brought up. I mean, that was my guiding principle. You know, how do you live? Do you want to live like the Joneses? Do you want to have the parties where everybody is having a good time? And do you want to, is that how you want to define your life? So you're going to always go back to this crisis point in your life. When you're in a situation of adversity and a lot of fun, you have to decide, how do you want to live your life? How do you want, what legacy do you want to leave behind? And I think and it's not about money. It's about really believing that you can set a path for the next person to follow. I mean, that's where it's, I mean, I don't think about, oh, you know, I want to leave a legacy. That's not important. It's how do I leave a path for my brother? How do I leave a path for the next person that is following me? And that's what it's about. I mean, and I don't want to make it seem like the NBA was this terrible thing. It was an amazing career. It was an unbelievable experience. To be 450 of the best players in the world at any given point is the most extraordinary thing that you can imagine. Every game is an amazing game. Every game you're playing the best players in the world. I mean, it was truly extraordinary. I have beaten up Shaq. Well, he beat me back up too, but I did get a few shots in, you know. Yao Ming, 7'6". That was a really good day. You know, I really enjoyed that dunk very much. So the NBA represented like this amazing opportunity where you could extol your basketball knowledge and your basketball experience. But what I learned most than anything else is that I got to travel all over the world. So I was able to go to China with Yao Ming and really hang out and do work, right? And I was able to do, so Basketball Without Borders is one of those programs the NBA have that you go all over the world and you bring basketball to people. But you're able to do amazing things. Like in China before Yao Ming, they weren't able to get a commercial about AIDS education. And because of him and the power that he has as a sport athlete, he was able to go in and really bucket and really got them to put like a commercial on with him and Magic Johnson talking about AIDS and how important it was to address those kind of stuff. So to be a part of that kind of experience shows kind of the power of sports and what we can accomplish. But I think one of my favorite stuff was obviously going to the NBA Finals when I was in Orlando and just really experience what these guys are going through right now. Is that I could sit back on the couch and say, I know what they're going through, I know they're nervous, I know what's happening. And it's that knowledge, really experiencing that was truly awesome for me. And I think also, my mom came up to the States and was part of my induction into the Sports Humanitarian Hall of Fame, and that was truly special. To be one of very few athletes, to be honored for humanitarian efforts all over the world was really truly awesome. But I'll tell you, the crowning achievement for me so far of my life was, one, being able to be the first person in my family graduated from college, and being the first person to also get my master's degrees in sports psychology. That was truly, I think, the defining moment for me in being able to really show people that I really am really going to continue to try and make it to the next level. So, how do you become active? Activism. So I started, I had a conversation with my professor my second year of college. And the conversation went like this. Young people is apathetic. I said, no, young people is not apathetic. He says, why? I said, I don't know, but young people is not apathetic. I said, apathy to me means that they don't care. But I said, if you look at what's been happening in college, young people are going to soup kitchen, they're working for Habitat for Humanity, they're doing all this extraordinary stuff, right? I remember when I was growing up, my uncles, I call it stealing an election, but it's more like influencing an election. I remember he'd give out so many beers to the locals, and then he'd get them all into a truck, and then he got them to go to the polls. He didn't necessarily tell them who to vote for, but he was able to swing an entire election. And so I learned very early that politics is very local. Politics is immediate. We're all engaged in politics all the time. So what the most important thing you have to teach people is to tell them what they've already been doing. So Democracy Matters was an organization I started, and the idea is, how do you empower young people to take ownership of the political system? How do you get them politically involved? So I said, a few years later, in the NBA, I started Democracy Matters, and the idea was this. I was going to prove my professor wrong, because he told me, he's like, if you believe that it's not apathy, Adonal, then show me that it's not. And Democracy Matters was established basically to show my professor that what's ailing the United States politically was the influence of money in politics, and not whether or not people care. Is that people felt helpless, that they weren't able to participate in this great democracy. So Democracy Matters, we serve college kids at 85 campuses across the United States. We advocate locally at government for campaign finance reform. So out of that, I wanted to come back to the Caribbean and do something that will impact Caribbean folks in very much the same way that I have experienced in my life. So I started the Kerosene Lamp Foundation. For many of you who grew up without electricity, you knew that if you didn't have the kerosene lamp on, and the island was pitch black, you couldn't get from one end of the island to the other without probably going into the ocean. So I started the Kerosene Lamp Foundation because I was always helpful. I was so hopeful when one of my neighbors had the kerosene lamp on. because I can use that as a track to kind of track my way across the island. And I felt that it was a fitting metaphor for young people. And the challenges that we have in the Caribbean are a little bit different than what we have in the United States, but not so much different. So we address the issue of AIDS education. We address the issue of literacy. We address the issue of how do you get young people to stay in school. We talk about sports psychology, how do you train the mind to be as powerful as the physical. And we create food for kids. We talk about nutrition. So it's really about using sports as a way to change attitudes and to change social attitudes. I believe that ultimately is that sports creates the last bastion of society where we think it's the most fair. We think it's the most just. That's why when a referee makes a bad call, we get so upset. But in sports, I think we have the opportunity to really teach fundamental moral things to our young people in a non-over-the-top way. And I think that that's important. So we have stations where you can go from a nutrition station to a rebounding station seamlessly. Because we make it so that it's not about preaching, it's about teaching. And those things are very different. And you want to empower young people to take ownership of their lives. So I've always been very active politically, and I've always been involved in my communities. And I think it's a simple fact that my grandmother is in the back of my head. She raised me. And she said, boy, you know you have big responsibility. And if you don't do it, she'll come around and give you a little clout behind the head. And that's, at the time I thought that was really annoying. But now, the fact that you always knew that somebody was there, ready to put you back on the right path, is really what this is about today. Is that we have a breakdown of the family structure so significantly deteriorated, where you had extended families in the house. I remember if you go to your teacher and your teacher tells you something you didn't do it right and they give you a little spanking, you go home and you tell your grandmother you're probably going to get another spanking for being rude. And I'm not saying that those things are not bad. Beating is bad, but I think that what is missing that opportunity is the fact that is that connection, that you always felt that you have a community watching you and a community that is invested in what you're doing. So I want to finish up with what I'm doing right now. And I decided to take a year off from basketball. I haven't been in basketball for the last 27 years. My knees hurt, everything hurts. I actually want to move back to the islands where there is a good sun and salt water for my knees. So I decided to take a year off. And I've been working with Shiana and the Kerosene Lamp Foundation and Democracy Matters. And we just authored my first children's book, Adonal Foyle Finest Game, which is going to be a series chronicling the life of coming from the Caribbean to the NBA. And I have a forthcoming book coming out in a month called Why Players Go Broke. It has been frustrating me to no end, and I wanted to handle it head on. So I got a group of friends and colleagues and talk about the issue. And just really, I did some media, did some commentating this year. So it's been a fun year. I mean, if this is retirement, I want to go back to work because I think I was more busy this year than when I was actually working. But I guess in conclusion, I wanted to say that the best advice I got is from my parents and my step-parents. And they said this: you are the architect of your life. No one can change your path but you. You have to be vigilant about the things you want. Dream about them. And make sure that you understand that at the end of the day, you're responsible for your life. There's a lot of reasons that we think that other people may be responsible for our life. But what I can teach you more than anything else, and what my life has demonstrated, is that I have the power to take control of my life. And I will say this. This could be done first in understanding your academic regimen, that you need to get your mind right. You need to be academically brilliant. And when you become a good sports person, along the way, somebody's going to tell you that you have to focus on one versus the other. That's a lie, right? In the United States, we see it all the time. People are telling you, you have to choose between being a good athlete or a good academic person. That's a lie. You have to make sure that you know with all in your heart that what I believe is that when I went into the classroom, I was going to be the best in that classroom. And when I went in the court, I was going to be the best in the court. That there was no limitation placed in me except the one I placed in myself. That's the greatest accomplishment that you have. You have control over your own destiny. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I'm not saying there's not going to be obstacles in the way. I'm not saying that you're not going to struggle. I'm not saying that you don't have a lot of baggage in your mind that you're walking with. I'm not saying any of those things. But I'm saying that you have the power within you to transform your path and to make it the way you want it. And there'll be a lot of naysayer on the path to success. You have to truly believe that you could change your life. Because if you don't believe it, no one else will. I think I'm going to stop it there, and I'll take some questions so I can more address what you guys have.